Hey everybody, welcome to another video on the Blue Abroad YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to take a moment to reflect. We are currently sitting within the bye. There will be no Carlton playing a game this weekend, which is quite sad, but also I think necessary. It's hard to believe we're just over halfway through the season. And in this video, we're going to do a mid-season review. We're going to take a look at what's happened. We're going to take a look at some of the themes and issues. I'm going to reflect on some things that I've noticed. And at the end of this video, I'm going to get you to add your contribution in the comments below. So, what has happened? It's a far cry from what last year was at this time. We were begging for the bye this time last year. Such was the hole that we were in. But after just beating Essendon the way we did and doing the reflection bit there, I don't think we need to go over too much about what happened last year. It's done. It's been done for a while. And I think, I'm really pleased. I'm really grateful to be sitting 9-4, second on the ladder at this point in the year. I don't think the ladder position is as crucial right now as what it will be at the end of the year, obviously, because also the competition's so tight. It was only a few weeks ago we were sitting outside of the 8, and that's just a symbol of what the entire league has been this year. It's been a really good season. I've really enjoyed it across the competition. From a Carlton lens, I think one of the first thoughts I had when doing the pre-season preview and looking ahead to what the season would be, I was curious to see how the boys would come out this season, knowing that last year, they reached a preliminary final. They achieved. They succeeded, and they did something that they hadn't done before. They had finally gotten over the ledge and played finals footy. And not only did they play finals footy, they almost made a grand final. So I was curious to see what the hunger was like coming into this season. Was there going to be any complacency kicking in? And really from the start of the season, from the first game that we saw, which was the Brisbane game in opening round, I think, reflecting now halfway through, it was probably a sign of things to come. And it was their ability to answer that question straight off the bat. Like, there was no complacency. Their ability to hang in games, stick fat, believe, came to fruition. And it was a remarkable win. It was a remarkable start to the year. A different start to the year. Opening round is a new concept that we have not experienced with this group. And that had a bit of an impact with the way we prepared. If we circle back a little bit further back, we lose Jack Silvani in pre-season. Sam Walsh has, the back flare up. We play opening round. We lose Sam Doherty. And I think what hasn't been spoken about as much and what's a really good sign of the group is, testing the depth of the list. And I think that has been a theme of the season thus far. You lose an on-field coach in Sam Doherty, irrespective of where he's at in his career. Maybe he's coming towards the end. I still think he's got plenty of footy left in him, but he's a hole, and he's something that you have to replace because if he's available, he's in your first choice team. Jack Silvani may be a little bit on the fringe, but also structurally, as we were talking about what was going to happen with Tom De Koning, was it going to be Tom and Pitta? Was it going to be Tom and Jack Silvani? You need to replace that. Sam Walsh, one of our more consistent players, one of our best players, if not our best player, not having him for the start of the season, it just meant that we had to shuffle some things around. You have new recruits, you've got draftees, Elijah Hollins comes to mind. How is he going to fit in? I do remember pre-season, it looked pretty clear to me at the time. Cripps had a monster pre-season. Elijah looked like he was having a great pre-season. Harry Mackay looked fit. Jesse Motlop was the other one. And I think all but Jesse Motlop have shown and have continued on what we saw in the pre-season, particularly at the training sessions, particularly with the way they were moving their bodies. And I think at this point in time, Patrick Cripps is probably the standout in terms of who I would guess to be leading the best and fairest. We'll find out at the end of the year. But yeah, they've all come on pretty well. Jesse Motlop, it's an unfortunate situation. Stubs his toe against the D's in the pre-season game, had a setback with his hamstring, and then just before he was ready to come back, has another one. We haven't seen him this season. We haven't seen a lot of the guys this season. We've had an injury. Is Is crisis the word? Was it a crisis? I don't know. Whatever it was a challenge, and we expected that challenges would come. They come every year in the form of injuries, suspensions. I don't think we've had suspensions as a theme for this year, just, at this point in time. Form issues, a form slump, I didn't know what was going to happen. I knew that there would be challenges. Every season has it. We have Zach Williams coming back from injury. The question of how would he fit back in. Halfway through the season, we've realized that the list has evolved. The backline in particular has evolved. The injuries that we had, well, not just the backline, I think the entirety of the team, it's evolved within half a season. We've replaced the guys who I've mentioned who are on the long-term injury list somehow. We've come out of that. The injury situation that we had, I think there were 13 or 14 on the list at the time. I think 8 of them would have been right up there for selection in the best team that we could possibly field. And so you've got to get through that. And the reality is it's unfortunate. You hate injuries. But the other reality is you don't get to see, and I don't think we would have seen Cincotta in the side the way that we've got him in the side right now, playing as a negating midfielder. I don't know if we see Lachie Cowan to the extent that we see him, to the point now that there's a bit more health amongst the backline, he's staying in the side. One of the big storylines, I think, in this year with the backline in particular is, in previous seasons, one of Boyd, Cincotta, Cowan, Kemp, they were usually getting dropped in order to make way for, Zach Williams or the like. Where we are right now, halfway through this season, is they're all staying in. And it's actually allowed the backline to evolve to the point where Cincotta's up the ground playing as that midfield tagger, as we've just mentioned. Zach Williams is now a forward, which at the start, to be honest, I wasn't sure about it. A month into it, he's kicked 10 goals. It looks solid. He's really simplified it. It looks to be playing with some freedom. And I think overall we've seen a maturity. We have. I was hoping to see a maturity, and I have seen a maturity. I think our consistency, which was the big question mark going into the year, and that was the next layer of growth for us, I think it's coming along nicely. Is it there yet? It's getting there. I think it's a constant journey to consistency. I don't think there's a declaration right now that we are a consistent side. I think we have been a consistent side. There is still half a season to go. I'm not naive to the fact that just because things look great right now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee you that things are going to look great in the second half of the season. Having said that, based off what I've seen, based off how the list has been tested and how I think it's passed the test, based off the difficulty of the opponents that we've faced, we have played the best sides in the competition in the first half of the season, which I think is a blessing. Because they talked about feedback as the key word last year. You get the feedback, you realize what your game plan is, you realize what you can and can't do and how it stacks up against the best sides in the competition. And then you have the entirety of the second half of the year to work on it. And, we've been in every single game but for the Sydney game. The Sydney game was obviously at the SCG. Swans are flying. They're powerful. They're explosive. They're fit. And they've had, over 15 players play every game this season. So that's something I hope we can get in that second half of the season that we're about to approach. I think that was probably the game where changes had to be made. And I think that's another feature of what I've seen. We've made adjustments in season. We've not, you back in what you have, but obviously when you lose the way we did against the Swans, comprehensively, systematically and the like, you have to make changes. So that's something I'm really pleased with. I think when I think of the best moments and the best wins, we've had quite a lot of really good wins. I think the best one for me so far, the one that I've enjoyed the most, probably still Brisbane. To get into the hole that we were in, and I know that halfway through the year, the Lions aren't going as great as what we all thought they would have pre-season. But, regardless, the Lions at the Gabba, up 46. And to come back from that, find a way, it just sort of speaks to the belief within the group that no matter where they find themselves in a game, they've got an ability to stick together and fight their way through it. So I still hold that in really high regard. When it comes to performances across the 4 quarters, I think what we've seen in the previous 2 games, maybe 3, I think we've really turned a corner in that regard. So Gold Coast, there was a few question marks around that game, and maybe the margin should have been more, but the Suns are a better side this year. But the previous 2 in particular, Port Adelaide away and then Essendon, the way in which we managed the game, the way in which we absorbed the momentum from the other side, the way in which we responded after every goal that was kicked against us, and to not allow the momentum to extend to a point where it was too dangerous for us to chip it back. I've been really impressed with. The Blues are good. It's a continuation on from last year. We're not playing as erratically as what we had in the past, I feel. We've got a greater sense of stability amongst the group, which is fascinating because we still haven't had stability amongst the team yet. We've got certain guys who I think are really important parts of how we go about it to come back into the side. I'm speaking of Adam Chera. I'm speaking of Matthew Cottrell. I'm speaking of Jack Martin. Jesse Motlop to an extent. I think now that Zach Williams is a forward, it's going to pose a selection headache once Jesse's fully fit and firing. I'm a big believer in Jesse. I think he's got the magic, and I think together with Martin and Williams, the idea of them in a forward line and settling in for a couple of months with Charlie and Harry, I think that's something that will make us better. I look at the year so far, I'm looking at about a 7.5. I think it's been really enjoyable. The losses have been... I don't think we've been devastating in the losses. Adelaide was very frustrating for obvious reasons. Game was in control. We now know how the Crows are going this season. So that's one you let slip. Your opponent kicks 16-4. That's footy. You can lose to anyone on any given day. We have been challenged. We have been questioned. We've been doubted. And I'm curious now because I feel like we've come out of this first half of the season with what I would say is arguably almost best case scenario. I think doing the predictor and the preseason predictions early in the season, if you had said you're going to be 9-4 going into the bye, I would have said brilliant. That is a fantastic result. And I still believe that. You've banked 9 wins going into the final couple of months of the season. So overall, I'm happy with that. I don't want to subscribe too much to the theory that, the second half of the season will open up because of the fixture, because what generally happens is the teams that you underestimate, particularly in the second half of the season, once you start getting to a point where finals might be out of the question for them, you start seeing these teams play with freedom. We were no different years ago. We get to that second half, season was over, pressure's off, and then we'd start beating the finalists. So the challenge coming up now is firstly to get the team as healthy as possible and settled, make a run, stay healthy, and then I think we're going to be going into more games in the second half of the season as favourites. And so that's the next layer of challenge for us. This is something that we haven't dealt with very well in the past at all. And I think now, how do you go into games knowing you're becoming hunted? You're not so much the hunters. There's a belief and a trust I'm sensing with the group. The players that are staying in the side, the roles that are being fulfilled, the players that are fulfilling those roles are not household names, but we're starting to talk about them more and more. Fogarty, Cincotta, Cowan, Kemp, these types. These are not the first names that people think of when they say, who's the best players in the Carlton Football Club. And I think that in itself is a sign of growth. So I'm positive. I'm optimistic. I have full belief in this group and what they're capable of. And, they've had plenty of experience together now. I truly believe we're starting to see us find this sweet spot. We're at the beginning of it. Maybe last year was the start of it, and I think we're continuing on, and I'm really pleased with that. I just hope that, as we continue to push closer to September, that desire, that hunger, that refinement starts coming, which I think it will. We're a much more professional outfit, and I'm here to enjoy it. Yeah, I've said it multiple times. kicked and screamed and begged and demanded times like this, where we would go to games, watch the boys play in a manner in which, was close to their potential. I think we're starting to see that. We're seeing guys express themselves more, and we're seeing improvement. When I think of who has been the most improved, usually it's been hard to say that, particularly halfway through the year. Whereas I look at halfway through the year now, guys who have taken really taken their game to another level. I think of Tom de Koning. We've gone through this phase with Tom, and I think broadly speaking, the ruck situation where it's like, is it Tom? Is it Pito? Pito comes in, it's the two of them. It works well. Pito goes out, Tom elevates. Tom's now playing the best football that we've seen him play, 73 odd games, and we're starting to get into the prime years of Tom de Koning. I think Brody Kemp's another one that's been really improved to be so reliable in his role. He's still so early in his career. Jordan Boyd, again, trust. Not a household name outside of the club, but if you talk to Carlton supporters, these are the names that we're talking about more, which I think is a really positive part of what's happened. I think obviously Chincotta, I think Lockie Cowan, which was interesting because Lockie Cowan, I didn't hear much about him in the preseason. It was a bit quiet, and all of a sudden now, you hear Voss saying, he's settled in the team and we want to settle him in the team. He's performing a role. We're seeing the evolution of the back line where, Newman, Saad and the like, they're playing a little bit more further up the ground. And that in itself has allowed our turnover game to develop. And that was the question mark going into the year. We know we're a really good, if not great, team at the contested possession game, the clearance game. That's us. Last year it was scoring from stoppage. That was us. And the question mark was, can we add the layer of scoring from turnover? Because that, in essence, is what the better teams, the great teams, the premiership teams do consistently. I think we're on the way again, where we've had some games where it hasn't looked good. We've had some games lately, particularly now that the best defenders are in the side again. It looks better. We're scoring off turnover at a much better clip than what we ever have. So it's pleasing. Our room for improvement, where can we improve? I truly believe it's a big part of this question has to do with the health of the list. If we can get our boys healthy, I guess having opening round, I do question, is that part of the reason why we saw so many injuries early in the season, or, a third of the season in the way we did? Is that just the nature of that? I know Collingwood suffered from it. Richmond definitely suffered from it. And I guess it begs the question, did that have an impact on the injuries? It was what it was. I mean, as a competitor, if you sit around and mope about your injuries, you miss the opportunities that get created. So I think it was a blessing in disguise. And, second half of the year, I mentioned some of those guys in there who I think are really important to making us go from a good to great side. That gets me excited. Some of my other favourite moments from what I've seen so far. Yes, we've mentioned Brisbane. Essendon was great. I really enjoyed that third quarter against the Giants at Marvel Stadium. They were peaking. They were absolutely at the top of their powers prior to that game. We have Zach Williams playing on Toby Green, getting subbed out. And I think that's the other part as well. Mid-game, we've had a few unfortunate injuries. I mean, Jacob Wiedering's had to be, subbed out of a game twice because of a cork. Zach Williams against the Giants, as I mentioned. And there's just that resolve. And I think even if you talk about Michael Voss, hearing the way he speaks, there's a different feeling around how he's going. There's a real, I guess he's settled. We've now halfway through his third season at the club, and I'm seeing the buy-in. So I don't want to get too carried away, but I also want to enjoy what's happened, because at the end of the day, we're out of control. We are not in control of the results, but I think across the board there are positives to look at, more so than negatives. 9-4, second on the ladder halfway through the year. I'm stoked. I'm really happy with it, and my hope for the second half of the year, I want to reflect on this video, and as I keep saying, I want to have a magic run of health. I really hope for it. I hope we get that. And I truly do believe if we are healthy and fit and in form at the right time of the year, that is the next couple of months, I believe we can win it. And I've allowed myself to dream a bit. I had suppressed that feeling for a long time. All I've ever wanted in my life is to experience a Carlton premiership. I really put that away in my mind. Like, don't even think about a premiership. You know, this team isn't even playing finals football yet. And for the first time ever, I actually got goosebumps as I say that. For the first time ever, I look at the team and I say to myself, I mean, give me any team in the competition on any day, I believe we can beat them. Sydney have been the standout team. You can't take that away from them. I would still back us in at the MCG, and I think that's crucial. The fact that we are talking about how important it is to make top four, to get the home final, says where we're at, really. So bring it on. We're going to make a run. We're going to go for it. And I think the fans, I do believe we're at a sweet spot this year where we've seen enough to believe. I think that's a critical part of it as well. If we believe and that energy is reflected in the way that we are at games and the atmosphere, then anything's possible. Just get this group to the MCG in finals footy, and the rest hopefully will take care of itself. So those are my thoughts. What about you? How have you assessed what's happened thus far in season 2024? We'll definitely reflect on this at the end of season review. So make your comments as descriptive as possible. I'll use them for the season review video. But signing off, happy Carlton supporter here. I'd love to read through your thoughts, your feelings, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how do you see the rest of the year playing out. Chat to you then. Go Blues.